you sort of fundamentally believe in the mission of what they're doing? And might be interesting. Okay, well look at that. See, this is why that networking is so important. So you said several things that are really important. You can have the idea, you can have the passion, you have to have the tenacity, but sustainable business models are what keep you in business. So discerning what the assets are that you have and what should happen to them, and then also having a group of people when your organization's at a strategic inflection point, like the merger. I see red flashing lights because you're the kind of talent that you want to bet on long term, and I don't know that that's exactly right. So you need people that can help you look at that. And I know one of my mentors and funders was the founder of Sesame Street. And I would go to his office and I'd wonder what to wear to ask him for $1 million when I had senior net. Should I wear orange or blue? You know, I'd be in the elevator, orange or blue, you know? And I would go up to his office and I'd say, Lloyd, where am I? He said, it's hard to know where you are because we don't know where you're going. So my vision was to make a difference in the lives of loneliness in older people. Now I've become one, and so you know, we're not going to get marginalized. We're going to kind of change it up. And so what you have to think about is what's the long-term vision. And you mentioned another word that's really important. You need a great team, and that team needs to be the highest intellectual candle power that you can find. And that's why hanging out at Santa Clara is kind of a good idea, because we've got enlightened men, talented women, and a global perspective and a global network. So you could take the youngest undergraduate class here and do business in the Philippines, Beijing, Singapore, Brazil in 3 days because of that network. And that's not a plug for Santa Clara. It's just knowing that when you have significant visions, as these 3 entrepreneurs do, your vision requires you to have talent around you, and top talent will come in. So, you know, I had my closing dinner at my second company at Melinda Gates' home because she believed in the vision of what we were doing. So there's no barrier to the talent you can bring around your vision if you have a significant vision. Now, someone called me one day and said, I want to connect nannies because I think they're lonely. I don't think that was a significant vision, that nannies need to go to the park to have someone to talk to. So, but these are passionate, important visions. So I want to turn to our next presenter, Arlene, and she just sort of won me over, and I want to have her talk about the power of the media in shaping your vision, and how did this little clip we're about to see get the New Zealand person who created eBay in New Zealand, a friend we both have in common, to support your vision. So.
Every year, women die due to complications of pregnancy and childbirth. About 1 woman every minute. With simple life-saving skills, some of these deaths could be prevented. My name is Arlene Samen, and I'm a nurse practitioner. I started a nonprofit called One Heart. We started reducing maternal and newborn mortality in Tibet and taking that model around the world. Right now we're in a very remote area in Mexico. The pateras, who are the traditional birth attendants, told us there's a fear of C-section and complications, and they would rather die than to come in and get help. No breathing. This baby's not breathing. What we're teaching is basic home-based life-saving skills. Suck in the hole. They need to deliver with a clean birth kit, a sterile cutting instrument. These new messages that are safer will now be passed on from one generation to the next. Thank you. I feel so honored that I have this opportunity to come and meet these people, empower them. If we get them to change one behavior here that makes it safer for the women and children to survive, one by one, that baby was saved. One by one, that mother was saved. That's huge.
Technical problems here. In 1997, I had the opportunity to meet His Holiness the Dalai Lama
who asked me to go to Tibet and help the women and children. Well, 13 years later, I still don't know how to say no to him, and I'm still doing the work that he asked me to do. And I went to Tibet in '97 and saw the plight of so many women living in just horrific conditions out in the countryside that had no knowledge at all around childbirth or even how they got pregnant, and certainly not knowing what to do when they had a baby. And most times they delivered alone at home, totally unattended. And there were a lot of cultural and spiritual beliefs around childbirth in all the cultures where I work. And oftentimes they believe actually that the blood of childbirth is polluting. So the women are exiled into the barn where the animals are, or in a tent. And I thought, well, gee, how are we going to overcome that? And we actually sat with the women and the families and talked about that and said, well, what is it about the pollution that is, so bad? And then they're like, well, if we pollute the home, then bad spirits will come and then they'll make everyone sick in the family. So we thought, well, what if we could contain the pollution? What if we put this sheet out and the woman could deliver on this clean sheet, and we could actually contain the pollution and none of the blood would get on any of the clothes or the blankets, and then we could bury it. And they thought about it for a while and they thought, that sounds good. And in that moment, we changed how childbirth was practiced in Tibet. And to this day, they now deliver with a skilled birth attendant. The delivery rate at home alone went from 85% to 10%. Women started to go to the skilled birth attendants, and the one reason they didn't go was they believed that they didn't want a stranger at their delivery. And so we said, well, if you got to know the birth attendant and you went early on, they would no longer be a stranger, and you could have them at your delivery. What a great idea. So in those moments, those aha moments where you're willing to see the challenge and then not just say, well, okay, we can't do anything about that, but to actually engage the people where the behavior has to change and ask them, well, how can we get around that? What can we do different? And like I said, now in Tibet, women do not deliver alone at home. They deliver with trained birth attendants. The rate went from 85% down to 10%. Newborn mortality dropped from 10% to 3%. And we felt, aha, we're onto something. And why wasn't WHO and UNICEF and Save the Children able in a lot of countries to turn back the tragic tide of birth-related deaths? And I really thought long and hard about that and had an opportunity 2 years ago to become one of the Malago Foundation Fellows. And that was the question Kevin Starr said to me, is what made your model successful? And I had to really think about all the components of that, but the main component was behavior change. That we went in and we showed respect and we understood their culture, and then decisions on how we were going to make the changes became a group process. It was not us alone as Westerners coming in to make the change. We did it in respect to their culture, and the family made the changes. The husbands that had these beliefs all of a sudden were advocates. The grandmothers became advocates. The community became engaged in a safe motherhood campaign. And we then now have taken that model to Nepal and in the Copper Canyon of Mexico. And we're looking at 2 new sites in the Congo and in China and another Tibetan area. And the common theme again and again is that the gaps where women fall through are lack of transportation, lack of finances, lack of education, lack of family support.
And so we created what's known now as the Network of Safety. And our network catches these women so that they don't fall. And we work together as a community from the pregnant woman herself all the way to the government. And we work together as a team. And again, having the team and having the right people on your team, even if it's you have to go to the president of the country and say, I need your wife to be on my team, because it's not okay for women to have to face death in order to give life. That's not acceptable. And when I give that talk in Nepal, men that normally exile their women out, and in common in India as well, out into the barn, have now come back to me and said, you know what, we would like to understand more about that. We want to be change makers. And in those moments when I've looked back at the hardest day of my life and the best day of my life was being out there in the villages and having those people come to me and thank me and say, you know, these messages we will now pass on to our daughters. They won't have to die like our neighbors and like my, sister. Those are the best days of my life, and it makes it so worthwhile that although it's very difficult as a woman to run a nonprofit, to be a CEO, you have so many demands in your life, your children, your husband, work, family around you that never gets to see you, you're never home for Christmas. They all know that what I'm doing is so important that they would never walk away. They just are so there for me to be a part of that change. And I invite every one of you here to believe in the fact that you can be a change maker. I never went into nursing thinking that I was going to change anything. And I know it's possible. So dream big and know that everything is possible. And I listened to these two brilliant women and all these other brilliant women today. And I know you had those moments and times where you're thinking, what am I doing? I'm giving up everything to be a CEO. And then you gain everything because now you're also change makers. You're changing what's happening in this world.